In our next session in Adobe Illustrator and perspective drawing, we're going to talk about adding some details to a perspective environment. Now, this is the kind of thing that you're going to work on making today. What you're looking at right now is kind of a finished version of this today. You're going to start off with a file that looks like this. So you're going to start off with this file right here, and you'll wind up with something like this. Yours doesn't have to look just like mine, but you do have to work on putting in these elements, and I'm going to show you in this movie the tricks that are involved in doing all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and just close out my one that's kind of already done. In fact, I'll go ahead and close this one as well. Again, I should say I'm working on a Mac, and it's going to look a little bit different, and I'm not connected to my Drive H or my Drive L that you'll be connected to at school. So here's how this will work for you. Once you start Illustrator, you'll click File, you'll click Open. You're going to have to browse to Drive L to the courses drive. And you're going to work on this perspective environment. That is the file that you're going to be looking for. It will be in the assignments folder. There will be a kind of a folder for this session, and you're going to work on a perspective environment. So you want to open that up. And again, here's what it looks like. Pretty plain, right? First thing we're going to want to do is turn on and I'm going to close a couple of things here. We're going to want to turn on the perspective grid. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-I to turn on the perspective grid. We're going to need that for what we're doing here today. Okay. Now the next thing you might want to do is go ahead and come over here to the toolbar on the left hand side and click on, it'll probably show the perspective grid tool here first, but you want to click on that, and I like to tear this thing off, so I have that little floating tool panel that has the perspective selection tool on it. You use that a lot. Alright, so I've got that ready to go. Now I also happen to know that I'm going to use the Pathfinder for something, so I'm going to go up to the window menu and turn on the Pathfinder, and for the time being I'll just set my Pathfinder out of the way, and I'm going to come back to that, but I am going to use it for something a little bit later. Okay. Alright, so let's go to work, and I'll just kind of work my way from the top down on this list of items that I'm making. The sky first of all. Okay, well, the sky, it turns out, doesn't have to be drawn in perspective. I'll show you how you can make it look like there's a sky in your image that you're working on here. First of all, this one doesn't have to be drawn in perspective, so I want to set the widget up here in the top left corner on no active grid. I don't need any perspective on this at all. And I'm just going to take the rectangle tool here, and I'm going to draw a large rectangle that starts at the upper left corner of the artboard, comes down to the horizon line, and stretches to where the horizon line intersects with the right side of the artboard here. Well, the first thing I might want to do is change the color of it. So I think I'll just double click on this and work on finding a kind of a nice sky blue color that I want for this. That will work. So I'll click OK there. Now we have a blue sky, but now the problem is it's in front of everything else. Okay, well, I'm going to right click and do Arrange and send that to the back. And next thing I'm going to do is I also want to do the ground. That's the second thing. So I'm going to get the rectangle tool, and I'm going to start here where the horizon line intersects the left edge of the artboard, and I'm going to drag down to the bottom right corner of the artboard, try to match that up as best I can. Now once again, that's coming up with a blue colored because that's what I picked last time. So with that rectangle selected, I think I'll make it kind of a dark gray. All right, now once again, that's covering up the bottom half of the building, so I'm just going to do a right click on that rectangle and go to Arrange and go to Send to Back. And so that sends that all the way to the back. If you ever want to see how it's looking without the grid on there, just do a quick Control-Shift-I and take a peek and see how it's coming along, how it's looking, and then you can always turn the grid back on as you continue to work. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and do a cloud here, and I don't need any perspective for this either. Now there's a lot of ways you could do a cloud, and if you use your imagination and come up with a different way than me, totally fine. I'm going to use the ellipse tool here, and I'm just going to draw a circle over here on just beside the artboard, and I want to fill that with white. I'll just use this white fill up here, and I don't think I want it to have an outline at all, so I'm going to set it on no outline. Alright, so I've got the ellipse tool set with white and no fill. And what I'll do here is just use that ellipse tool and quickly I'm just drawing ovals, circles. I'm just making sure they kind of overlap. What I've done here is it's just a whole bunch of ovals and circles that are all white, and they're all laying on top of each other, and they're just overlapping. So when you look at them that way, it looks like a big white blob. Well, this is where I'm going to use the Pathfinder. I'm going to select all of those. There we go. And I'm just going to use the Pathfinder, the Unite feature on the Pathfinder. Now, with that united, I can flatten that out a little bit. If I feel like I made it a little too, tall or fat or big or whatever, I can resize it. And let's move this back over a bit. And that, that looks like it might be a little big, so I'm going to size it down some, and I'll just go ahead and stick it up here in the sky. Now remember the alt drag trick, because if you would like to have more than one cloud and you don't mind them looking kind of similar here, I'll just do an alt drag and stick another one over here, and I can alt drag. And next thing I'm going to work on is I would like to have kind of a black asphalt or a black macadamized street right here, that runs right like this is a corner, like this is a street corner. All right, now I'm going to show you, you might discover other ways to do this. I'm going to show you a way to do it, but you might find other ways, and if you do, that's, again, totally fine. I'm going to use the pen tool, but it's not going to be a terribly fancy thing. It's just going to be some clicks. It's not going to be, I'm not going to make curves. I'm just going to put down some anchor points and just use the pen tool. All right, here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make my first anchor point right at the vanishing point on the left-hand side. Just click. Then I'm going to come right up here to, well, I could come right up here to this very front corner of this building that's on the corner, and I'll just do a click, boom, right there. Now I'm going to go way over here to the right vanishing point and do a click over there, pow. Okay, now don't worry if it fills in and it looks funky like that. Don't worry about that. I'm not done yet. All right, now I'm going to come down here. I think I want this street. I could click it right here at the bottom of the grid, but I think I'm going to come straight down and click at the bottom of the artboard. All right, I'm going to put an anchor right there. And then I'm going to go back to where I started, way over here in the left vanishing point, and click there and put an anchor. And that finishes that off. That kind of fills that in. Now I'm going to select that, and again I did that with no active grid here. That doesn't really need perspective, I don't think, because I kind of drew it in there the way I wanted anyway. So with that selected, I'm going to change that to a black fill. There we go, and it kind of looks like I've got a road there. Now the one thing that's a little bit funky about this, if I deselect that and I'll turn off my grid for a moment, you notice how it sticks out past the artboard. Okay, well again, it just depends on how picky you are. If that doesn't bother you, then it doesn't bother me on this assignment. It's totally okay on this assignment. But if that really is something that kind of bugs you, we can take care of it with the Pathfinder. Once again, I'll pull the Pathfinder over here and I'll get a rectangle. I'll draw a rectangle that just kind of goes right to the edge of the artboard, right like that. All right, see how I did that? It's just a rectangle that's covering up that part that's sticking out. Now I got to take the arrow tool, and I'm going to click on this click on the road, and then shift click on the rectangle. That means they're both selected, and I can do a minus front. Minus front, remember what that does, it just cuts off whatever is underneath that rectangle. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to draw a rectangle, and again I'll take the black arrow, the selection tool, I'll click the road, shift and click on the black box, do a minus front on the Pathfinder, and that cuts that off right at the edge of the artboard. So if you think that looks better, you can do that kind of thing right there. All right, so I've got a street. All right, I've got sky, ground, cloud, street. All right, now these other things are going to be in perspective, and I just want you to know how to do them, because in the assignment that's coming up, you're going to have to be able to do these things. I'm going to go ahead and close my Pathfinder. Do I want to close? Yeah, I think I can close my Pathfinder. All right, now I'm going to turn my grid back on. Control-Shift-I. There we go. All right, I want you to put one door on a building. I don't care what building, and I don't care what side of the building. I want a door on a building. Well, folks, this part's really easy. I'm going to I'll take the perspective selection tool and pick the left grid, get a rectangle, and I'm just going to draw a door right here on this gray building like that. It's easy as that. You can just draw it right in perspective if you want to. All right, or you could do it this way. You could say, okay, no active grid, and you could draw a rectangle, out here on the side. And then you can pick, like, let's say I want to put a door on the other side of that gray building. I say, okay, pick the right grid, take the perspective selection tool, cancel that. Right grid selected, and just pull this door over and drop it right on there on that side. So you could do it either way. You can draw it with no perspective and just draw it like over on the side of the artboard and then drag it into perspective, or you can go ahead and pick a you can pick a grid, the left grid, the right grid, and you can draw it in perspective right from the very beginning. Either way works. How about a window? All right, I did 2 doors. You only have to do 1. How about a window? Let's put on a window. All right, well, I've got the right grid selected. So if I want to do a window here, I could just come here, maybe on this gray building, and I could just draw in a real quick window there. And I could change the fill color to white. I could give it a stroke if I wanted to. You can still do all those typical things that you do to shapes and things. There we go. And you can even do this if you're using the perspective selection tool, and you can do an alt drag. I could alt drag that, and it keeps that second window is still in perspective, and I could make as many copies of that as I want. I could hold down the alt key and drag this window, and I can make one down here on this building if I want to, and I could alt drag that and scoot it way down here, and it's going to keep the perspective in those shapes because I'm using the perspective selection tool and I have a grid selected on the widget. I have the right grid selected. So actually, see, really easily and quickly I did 4 windows. All right. So now let's take a look at one other kind of little detail. I'm going to do a quick street sign, kind of like a stop sign. And to begin with, I'm going to set my widget here to no active grid. All right, I'll click in the circular area around the cube there, and I'm going to start off just with a kind of a thin rectangle like this. I'm going to build this a little bigger than what it's actually going to be in the final version. I think I'll fill that with black, I guess. All right, so it's just like a black rectangle, kind of skinny. Now I'm going to get the Polygon tool, and I want to have an octagon, which I've already got here. It's 8 sides. Remember, if you're drawing and you don't have an octagon, if you got the wrong number of sides, you just hit your arrow key. Like I've got 6 sides right now. I'm going to hit up arrow key on the keyboard. Oh, come on. There is that. No, that's still not. All right, that's 6, 7, 8. My arrow keys are acting strange. All right, so there I've got, it's like a stop sign. It's shaped like a stop sign. All right, and I will fill it with red. Lovely, just to be typical, I guess. All right, I'm going to set that right on top of that post. Now remember this, I'm drawing this with no perspective assigned to it. All right, now one thing that could help here, I'm going to select both of these objects over here, the octagon and the rectangle that I have here. I'm going to select them both, and I'm going to go to Object, and I'm going to group them. We've talked about grouping before, so I'm going to group that. That means that they'll stay together. Now, okay, good. They're going steady. All right. Now I'm going to use the perspective selection tool, and I can decide, okay, like which side of the street do I want this to go on? Which way do I want it to be oriented? Excuse me. So I think I'll try it with a right grid selected, and I'll just drag it right down here, and I can put it, I can try it wherever I want. Now I think actually with the right grid selected, it kind of looks better if I stick it over on this side, and then I can use my perspective selection tool to size it down if I don't like the size of it. And it kind of looks like a stop sign. That's, even though I put it on the left side of the image, the right grid was selected, and it looks like it would be a stop sign for people coming from over here on the left. I didn't put words on it, but I could have. All right. Now I could have done that just the opposite. I could have put it on the other side over here if I'd wanted to. And it doesn't, it's not like 3-dimensional, but it doesn't look bad. It looks pretty good. All right, if you want to take a peek at what it looks like, a Control-Shift-I will turn your grid off, and hey, that's just the addition of the sky and the windows and the doors and things like street signs and things like that just make all the difference in an image like this. It looks much, much, much better, if you ask me, and in my opinion, it looks better. All right, so when you get this done, it already has a name. It's called Perspective Environment. So what you would need to do is just save it as and get to your network drive. You can't save it back into the assignments folder. So you got to save it on your network drive, but then you would need to drag it and drop it into your turn-in folder on Drive L. So this is all about kind of creating some detail in a perspective environment in Adobe Illustrator. It's your turn.